I never expected a coffee order to change my life. At the time, I was just trying to survive another miserable Monday. My name is Bradley, and every weekday started exactly the same. Alarm at 6:30. Shower. Half-awake drive to work. Then a stop at the little coffee shop 2 blocks from my office. The place wasn't anything special. Small storefront. Exposed brick walls. Local artwork hanging everywhere. The kind of cafe where people sat with laptops for 6 hours after buying one drink. I wasn't there for the atmosphere. I was there because their coffee was good and because caffeine was the only reason I remained a functioning member of society. For almost a year, I'd been ordering the same thing. Large iced vanilla latte. Extra shot. Oat milk. Nothing exciting. Most of the employees knew my face but not my name. We'd exchanged the usual polite smiles, and that was it. Then one Monday morning, everything changed. I walked through the door and immediately noticed someone new behind the counter. He looked about my age. Maybe 26 or 27. Dark blonde hair. Athletic build. Warm brown eyes. The kind of smile that somehow made you forget what you were about to say. Unfortunately, forgetting what I was about to say was exactly what happened. "Morning," he said. His voice was deeper than I expected. I blinked. Hi. Great start, Bradley. Real smooth. The guy smiled wider. "What can I get started for you?" For some reason, I suddenly became very aware that he was looking directly at me. Not in a weird way, just attentive, interested, like I was the only customer in the room. "I'll have a large iced vanilla latte." He tapped something into the register. "Extra shot. Oat milk." I looked up. "Yeah." He grinned. "I guessed." I laughed. "Am I that predictable?" "Maybe a little." His smile was playful. I found myself smiling back. For a brief second, neither of us looked away. Then the moment broke when someone joined the line behind me. "That'll be $6.82. I paid and moved aside. As I waited, I couldn't stop glancing toward the counter. Not because he was ridiculously attractive. Okay, maybe partly because of that. But there was something else. Something easy about him. Comfortable. Like talking to an old friend you'd somehow forgotten existed. A few minutes later, he handed me my drink. "Here you go." I reached for it. Our fingers brushed. Tiny contact. Completely accidental. Yet somehow my brain treated it like a major historical event. "Thanks." "No problem." Then he tilted his head slightly. "See you tomorrow." I froze. Tomorrow? Then I realized he was joking. Or maybe not. Either way, I laughed and left. The entire drive to work, I couldn't stop thinking about him, which annoyed me because I was 28 years old, not 16. I shouldn't be obsessing over a cute barista after one conversation. Yet there I was, thinking about his smile during meetings, thinking about his eyes during lunch, thinking about him way more than was healthy. The next morning I returned, partly for coffee, mostly for reasons I wasn't ready to admit. The moment I walked through the door, I saw him, and somehow he saw me immediately too. His face lit up. Actually lit up. The kind of reaction that made my stomach do something embarrassing. "Morning." I stepped up to the counter. "Morning." Before I could order, he started typing into the register. "Large iced vanilla latte. Extra shot. Oat milk." My eyebrows rose. He looked pleased with himself. "Am I right?" I laughed. "Okay. That's slightly impressive." "Slightly? Fine. Very impressive." "Thank you." His grin returned. "I'm Ashton, by the way." The introduction caught me off guard. For a second, I just stared. Then my brain remembered how conversations worked. "Bradley. Nice to officially meet you, Bradley." The way he said my name sent a ridiculous amount of happiness through me. I hated how much I liked it, or maybe I loved it. I wasn't sure. For the next week, our interactions stayed short. A few minutes every morning. Nothing more. But somehow those few minutes became the best part of my day. Ashton always seemed genuinely happy to see me. He'd ask how work was going. Remember little details I mentioned. Make jokes while preparing drinks. Every morning I'd leave smiling. And every evening I'd catch myself looking forward to seeing him again. Then Friday happened. And that's when things became dangerous. Because Friday was the first time Ashton remembered something bigger than my coffee order. He remembered me. I walked into the cafe and joined a short line. The shop was busier than usual. Ashton was helping another customer when I entered. I didn't think he'd noticed me. But the second he finished their order, he looked up, directly at me, and without missing a beat, he called out, "Morning, Bradley." My heart nearly stopped. Not because he'd remembered my name, because he'd remembered it when I wasn't standing in front of him. Because he'd spotted me across a crowded cafe and immediately smiled, like he'd been hoping I'd show up. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But when I reached the counter, Ashton was still smiling. Running a little later than usual today. I blinked. "You noticed that too?" "Of course." His answer came so naturally that neither of us seemed to realize what he'd said until after the words were out. For one strange second, we just stared at each other. Then Ashton looked down at the register. A faint blush appeared on his cheeks. And suddenly my pulse doubled. Because for the first time since we'd met, I started wondering something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. Maybe I wasn't the only one looking forward to these mornings. After that Friday, things changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough for me to notice. And once I noticed, I couldn't stop noticing. The following Monday, I walked into the cafe and Ashton already had my drink started before I reached the counter. "That's getting creepy," I told him. He laughed. "You're welcome." I didn't say thank you. "You were going to." The worst part? He was right. I handed over my card. "How many customers do you memorize?" "Not many." His answer came quickly. Too quickly. Almost like he'd already thought about it. "Really?" He shrugged. "Most people stare at their phones and barely make eye contact." I couldn't argue with that. Then his eyes met mine. "But you're easy to remember." For a second, my stomach completely forgot how to function. I laughed awkwardly. "Easy to remember?" "Yeah." He looked down, suddenly busy with the espresso machine. "You actually talked to me. I should have left it there. Normal people would have left it there." Instead I asked, "And that's memorable?" His smile returned. "It is when you're working customer service." I spent the rest of the day thinking about that conversation. Again. Which was becoming a problem. A serious problem. Because this wasn't some random crush anymore. I was starting to genuinely like him. And I barely knew him. Over the next 2 weeks, our morning conversations got longer. A minute became 2. 2 became 5. Sometimes I'd arrive early before work just to have extra time to talk. Apparently Ashton started doing the same thing. One morning I arrived 15 minutes earlier than usual. The cafe was nearly empty. Ashton was arranging pastries behind the display case. The second he saw me, he smiled. "You're early." "So are you." His grin widened. "Touché." I ordered my usual drink. Then, instead of immediately helping the next customer, Ashton leaned against the counter. "So what's the verdict?" I blinked. "On what?" "The book." "Right." The book I'd mentioned reading 3 days earlier. A random detail. A completely forgettable detail. Yet somehow he'd remembered. We spent the next 10 minutes discussing novels while customers came and went. At one point, another employee actually walked over. "You know you're supposed to be working, right?" Ashton laughed. "I am working." The girl looked at me, then at Ashton, then back at me. A knowing smile appeared on her face. "Oh," and she walked away. My face immediately heated. Ashton's did too. Neither of us mentioned it. But neither of us missed it either. By the middle of the month, I had developed a routine. Wake up, get ready, drive to the cafe. Try not to smile like an idiot whenever Ashton saw me. Fail. Every single time. The ridiculous thing was that I didn't even care anymore. I looked forward to seeing him. Plain and simple. Work had been stressful lately. My apartment felt empty. Most of my friends were busy building lives and relationships. Meanwhile, the highlight of my weekdays had become a 5-minute conversation with a barista. That realization should have depressed me. Instead, it made me happy. because Ashton made me happy. Then one Thursday morning, everything shifted. I walked into the cafe expecting the usual, but Ashton wasn't there. I looked around. No sign of him. Another employee took my order. I tried not to look disappointed. Failed miserably. The employee noticed. Looking for Ashton? I nearly choked. No. The expression she gave me clearly said liar. He has today off. Oh, I hated how disappointed that sounded. She laughed. I'll tell him you missed him. Please don't. She looked entirely too entertained. The rest of the day felt weird, which was absurd. I'd known this guy for less than a month. Yet his absence left a noticeable hole in my routine. That was probably the moment I admitted the truth. I had a crush. A huge one. The kind that sneaks up on you. The kind that's impossible to ignore. The kind that makes one person's smile feel more important than it should. Friday morning couldn't come fast enough. When I walked into the cafe and saw Ashton behind the counter again, the relief that hit me was embarrassing. His face lit up. There he is. There he is. Not next customer. Not morning. There he is. Like he'd been waiting. My pulse instantly accelerated. Good morning. Miss me? His tone was teasing. Playful. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Then laughed. Maybe. The grin that spread across his face made my entire week worthwhile. Good. Neither of us seemed to know what to do after that. For a second, the air felt different. Charged. The kind of moment where both people know something's happening but nobody wants to say it first. Then a customer stepped up behind me. Reality returned. The moment ended. But not really. Because after that morning, neither of us pretended anymore. The flirting became obvious. At least to everyone except us. We still danced around it. Still acted casual. Still avoided saying anything direct. But everyone could see it. One afternoon, I stopped by after work instead of before. The cafe was quiet. Ashton was wiping tables. His eyes widened when he saw me. Bradley. Hi. He laughed. You're not supposed to exist after 8 a.m. I smiled. I was in the area. Complete lie. I had driven 20 minutes specifically to see him. Ashton definitely knew it too. Yet neither of us called it out. Instead, he made me another coffee and sat across from me during his break. That was the first time we'd ever talked without a counter between us. And somehow it felt completely different. More personal. More real. For nearly 40 minutes we talked about everything. Family. College. Terrible jobs. Future plans. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Like we'd known each other for years. Eventually his break ended. He stood reluctantly. I should probably get back to work. Probably. Neither of us moved immediately. Then Ashton smiled. See you Monday, Bradley. I stood too. See you Monday. As I walked toward the door, I heard one of his coworkers call out. Just ask him already. The entire cafe went silent. I froze. Ashton froze. Then everyone suddenly became very interested in their own business. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My face was burning. But just before I left, I glanced back and saw Ashton standing there, looking just as flustered as I felt. For the entire weekend, one question replayed in my head. Ask me what? Deep down, I already knew the answer. The scary part? I was starting to hope he knew it too. I spent the entire weekend trying not to think about Ashton. It didn't work. Not even a little. Every time I picked up my phone, I thought about him. Every time I passed a coffee shop, I thought about him. At one point, I even considered stopping by the cafe on Saturday morning before realizing how ridiculous that would look. Hey Ashton, I know I normally come before work, but now I'm showing up on my day off because I'm definitely not obsessed with you. Yeah. No thanks. So instead, I forced myself to stay busy. I cleaned my apartment, went to the gym, met a friend for lunch. None of it helped. By Sunday night, I was counting down the hours until Monday morning, which was probably the biggest sign yet that I was in trouble. Monday finally arrived. The moment I walked through the cafe doors, Ashton looked up from the espresso machine and smiled. Not a polite customer service smile. Not the smile he gave everyone. This one was different. It reached his eyes. The kind of smile reserved for someone you're genuinely happy to see. "Morning, Bradley." My chest tightened. "Morning." Ashton was already preparing my drink. I leaned against the counter. "Busy weekend?" "A little." His eyes met mine. "What about you?" "Mostly boring." "Good." I laughed. "Good." "Yeah." He looked away for a second. "Means I didn't miss anything interesting." That was the first time he openly admitted it. Not directly, but close enough. I felt myself smiling. "So you thought about me over the weekend?" Ashton's eyes widened. I immediately regretted saying it. Then he surprised me. Instead of backing away, he grinned. "Maybe." The exact same answer I'd given him a few days earlier. My heart nearly exploded. We stared at each other, neither speaking, neither looking away, until someone behind me cleared their throat. Reality returned once again. The customer line had formed. Ashton laughed awkwardly. Coffee first. Emotional crisis later. I couldn't stop smiling as I headed to work. That week became different from all the others. For the first time, our conversation started feeling less like flirting and more like genuine connection. I learned Ashton had moved to the city about a year ago. His family lived 3 hours away. He'd originally wanted to become a teacher before life had taken a few unexpected turns. He loved old movies, hated olives, had a habit of buying books faster than he could read them, and somehow every new thing I learned made me like him even more. The dangerous part? He seemed equally interested in learning about me. One morning he remembered the name of my sister. Another day he asked about a project I'd mentioned almost 2 weeks earlier. Nobody remembered details like that unless they cared. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then came the rainstorm, a massive one, the kind that turned roads into rivers and made everyone miserable. I left work late and got caught in the worst of it. By the time I reached the cafe, I was soaked. I only stopped because I desperately needed caffeine before my drive home. The place was nearly empty. Ashton looked up. His eyes immediately widened. "Bradley." I looked down at myself. "Yeah, I know. You look terrible." I laughed. "Thank you. I mean wet. That's somehow worse." He walked around the counter. Actually walked around it. "Come here." Before I could ask what he meant, he grabbed a stack of napkins and started helping dry my jacket. For a second, I just stood there, frozen, because Ashton was close. Really close. Close enough to smell his cologne. Close enough to notice tiny details I'd never seen before. The faint scar near his jaw. The tiny crease that appeared beside his eyes when he smiled. The warmth of his presence. Then he looked up and realized how close we were. The air changed instantly. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. My pulse hammered in my ears. Ashton's expression softened. For one terrifying, wonderful second, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, a loud crash came from the kitchen. Both of us jumped apart. The spell shattered. A coworker appeared carrying a box. "Sorry." Ashton rubbed the back of his neck. I laughed nervously. No worries. But neither of us looked entirely normal afterward. The next few days felt different, like we'd crossed some invisible line. Not dating, not together, but no longer pretending there wasn't something happening. Then Friday arrived, and with it came the moment that changed everything. I walked into the cafe expecting the usual. Instead, Ashton looked nervous, very nervous. The second I reached the counter, I noticed it. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." A pause. Then, "Actually, no." My stomach immediately tightened. Ashton looked down, then back up, then down again. I had never seen him struggle for words before. "What's wrong?" He exhaled. "Nothing's wrong." "Okay." Another pause, a longer one. Then Ashton finally laughed at himself. You know, this sounded way easier in my head. My pulse accelerated. Fast. Dangerously fast. Because suddenly I knew exactly where this was heading. And judging by the look on his face, so did he. He rubbed his neck again. A nervous habit I'd started recognizing. "Bradley." "Yeah." His eyes locked onto mine. "I was wondering if maybe..." He stopped, started again. I was wondering if you'd want to have dinner with me sometime. The entire cafe disappeared. The customers, the music, the conversations, everything, gone. All I could hear was my heartbeat. Ashton looked terrified, like he was already preparing for rejection, which somehow made me want to smile, because I felt exactly the same way. You mean? I intentionally let the sentence hang. His face turned red. Like a date. Couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I was so unbelievably relieved. For weeks I'd wondered, questioned, analyzed every interaction, every smile, every glance. And now here he was, standing in front of me, asking, finally asking. Ashton's expression immediately fell. Oh God! I shook my head. No. His face dropped further. Not no. I stepped closer, a smile spreading across my face. Yes. Everything about Ashton changed. The tension disappeared. The nervousness vanished. And the biggest smile I'd ever seen took its place. Yeah. Yeah. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there grinning like complete idiots. Then Ashton laughed. I spent 3 days working up the courage to ask. 3 days. Try 3 weeks. My heart melted. Completely. And suddenly I knew one thing for certain. This coffee shop crush had become something much bigger. Something real. And our first date was only 2 days away. I barely slept the night before our date. Not because I was nervous. Okay, that was a lie. I was extremely nervous. The kind of nervous where you rehearse conversations in the shower and then immediately cringe at yourself. I'd been on dates before. Plenty of them. But this felt different. Because with Ashton I already cared. That was the scary part. Usually, dates were about figuring out whether you liked someone. With Ashton, I already knew I liked him. The date was about finding out if this thing between us was actually as real as it felt. Sunday evening arrived way too quickly. We'd agreed to meet at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, just somewhere quiet enough to talk. I arrived 10 minutes early, then spent those 10 minutes questioning every life choice I'd ever made. When Ashton finally walked through the door, all those thoughts disappeared. He looked incredible. Dark jeans, black button-up shirt, hair slightly messy in a way that somehow looked intentional. For a second, I genuinely forgot how words worked. Then Ashton smiled, and I realized he was having the exact same reaction. Wow! The word slipped out before I could stop it. His cheeks turned pink. Good wow. Very good wow. The smile he gave me in response nearly finished me off. The hostess led us to our table, and within 5 minutes, most of my nerves disappeared. That was the thing about Ashton. Being around him felt easy, natural, comfortable, like we'd already skipped past the awkward getting-to-know-you phase. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about childhood stories, bad first jobs, embarrassing high school memories. At one point, Ashton laughed so hard at one of my stories that he nearly knocked over his water glass. You absolutely made that up. I swear I didn't. No way. It's true. He shook his head. I refuse to believe you got stuck in a playground tunnel at 16. I was helping my cousin. You were stuck. That's not the point. His laughter filled the restaurant, and I realized I hadn't stopped smiling for nearly 2 hours. Not once. By the time dinner ended, neither of us seemed ready to leave. So we walked. The city streets were quiet. The evening air was cool. Storefront lights reflected off the sidewalks. And somehow we ended up talking even more. About real things. Important things. The kind of conversations that matter. At one point Ashton looked ahead thoughtfully. Can I tell you something? Of course. He shoved his hands into his pockets. You know when you first started coming into the cafe? I smiled. The first day. Yeah. His expression softened. I thought you were cute immediately. My heart skipped. Actually skipped. Ashton laughed nervously. Seriously. I couldn't stop smiling. Really? Really? He looked away. I figured nothing would happen. Why? Because customers don't usually flirt with baristas. I laughed. Good thing I wasn't usually flirting. His eyebrows rose. Oh, I was panicking. That made him laugh. A lot of things make sense now. We continued walking, shoulders occasionally brushing, neither moving away, neither mentioning it. Eventually we reached a small park. Most of the benches were empty. We sat down beneath a row of trees wrapped in tiny white lights. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, just comfortable, peaceful. Then Ashton quietly said, "I really like you, Bradley." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they surprised me, because they felt genuine, completely genuine. I turned toward him. His eyes were fixed on the ground, suddenly nervous again. "I really like you too." The relief on his face was immediate, visible, and somehow adorable. We sat there smiling at each other, like two complete idiots. Then Ashton laughed softly. "What?" I asked. He shook his head. "I've wanted to hear you say that for weeks." My chest felt warm, comfortably warm, the kind of feeling that settles deep inside you. Then Ashton looked at me, really looked at me, and suddenly everything became very quiet. The traffic, the city, the world, gone again. Just him, just us. My pulse sped up. His did too. I could tell. Neither of us moved at first. Neither wanted to rush the moment. Then Ashton leaned forward slightly. Just enough. A question. Not an assumption. Not pressure. A question. I answered by closing the distance. The kiss was soft, gentle, brief, yet somehow it felt bigger than any kiss I'd ever experienced. When we pulled apart, both of us were smiling. The kind of smile you can't hide. The kind that happens automatically. Ashton laughed first. Then I did. And suddenly we were both grinning like fools. "Well," Ashton said. "Well," I agreed. "I've been wanting to do that." "Same." His smile widened. "Good." We sat there for another hour, talking, laughing, occasionally looking at each other and smiling for absolutely no reason. When it finally got late, Ashton walked me to my car. Neither of us seemed eager to say goodbye. Another sign, a very good sign. When we reached my car, he shoved his hands into his pockets again. Nervous. Cute. "I had a really good time." "I did too." He nodded. A pause. Then, "Would it be weird if I already wanted a second date?" I laughed. "Very weird." His face immediately fell. Then I smiled. But I was thinking the same thing. Relief returned instantly. And somehow his smile looked even brighter under the streetlights. As I drove home that night, one thought kept repeating in my head. For weeks, I'd looked forward to seeing Ashton every morning. Now I couldn't imagine not seeing him at all. And for the first time, that possibility felt real. Not a crush, not wishful thinking. Something real, something worth building. Neither of us knew it yet, but the best part of our story was still ahead. After our first date, things moved forward naturally. No games, no mixed signals, no wondering where we stood. Just two guys who liked each other and wanted to spend more time together. It was honestly refreshing. Our second date happened 3 days later. Then another that weekend. Then another the week after that. Before long, seeing Ashton outside the cafe became normal. And somehow, every time we got together, I liked him more. One evening, we grabbed burgers from a food truck and sat on the hood of my car watching the sunset. Another night, we got completely destroyed at minigolf because we spent more time laughing than actually playing. One Saturday afternoon, we wandered through a bookstore for almost 3 hours. 3 hours. Neither of us noticed. At one point, I found Ashton sitting cross-legged on the floor in the history section reading random facts aloud. I stood there watching him, smiling, probably looking ridiculous. He eventually looked up. "What?" I shook my head. "Nothing." His eyes narrowed. "You're doing that thing." "What thing?" "The smiling thing." I laughed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Aha." Then he smiled too. And somehow that became our thing. Catching each other staring. Pretending we weren't. Failing miserably. The strange part was how comfortable everything felt. I'd always heard people talk about finding someone who felt easy. Someone who felt like home. I never really understood what that meant until Ashton. Being around him didn't drain me. It energized me. I never felt like I had to perform, or impress him, or be anyone other than myself. And he seemed to feel the same way. One evening we were walking along the river after dinner. The city lights reflected across the water. Ashton was unusually quiet. Not sad, just thoughtful. Eventually I nudged his shoulder. "Penny, for your thoughts." He looked over, then smiled softly. "I was thinking about something. Should I be worried?" "Maybe." I laughed. "Okay, now I'm worried." Ashton took a breath, then said, "You make me really happy." The words caught me off guard. Not because they were dramatic, because they were sincere, simple, honest, the kind of statement that's impossible to fake. I looked at him, really looked at him. The evening breeze moved through his hair. His eyes searched mine, waiting. I was literally just thinking the same thing. The smile that spread across his face nearly stopped my heart. Then he slipped his hand into mine, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And honestly, it was. The next month passed faster than any month I could remember. Work remained stressful. Life remained complicated. But everything felt lighter, because Ashton was there. Every morning I'd stop by the cafe before work. Even on days when we had plans later. The routine mattered. It had become ours. One morning I arrived to find a small note taped to my coffee cup. "Good luck with your presentation today, Ashton." I stared at it, then looked up. He was pretending to clean a counter while secretly watching my reaction. I couldn't stop smiling. "You remembered?" He shrugged casually. "I remember things." That became another thing about Ashton. He remembered everything. Important meetings, family birthdays, tiny stories I'd told weeks earlier, things I didn't even remember mentioning. And somehow each time it made me feel seen, like I mattered. One Friday evening, Ashton finally invited me to his apartment. Not for anything dramatic, just dinner, a movie, time together. Still, I was nervous, because this felt like another step forward, a meaningful one. His apartment was exactly what I expected. Clean, organized, filled with books, and somehow completely Ashton. There were framed photos of family, plants that actually looked healthy, a collection of old movie posters covering one wall. I wandered around while he finished cooking. "You know," I called toward the kitchen, "this place is annoyingly nice." "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. It sounded like one. Dinner was great. The movie was mostly ignored. And somewhere around 10 o'clock we ended up sitting together on his couch talking instead. Again, always talking. Hours seemed to disappear whenever we were together. At one point Ashton leaned back against the cushions, looking comfortable, relaxed, happy. "You know what scares me?" I looked over. "What?" His expression softened. How quickly this happened. I understood immediately, because I'd been thinking the same thing. Not the speed, the intensity, the way he'd become important so quickly, the way my days felt incomplete without him, the way I looked forward to every text, every call, every smile. "It scares me too." Ashton nodded. Then after a moment, "But not in a bad way." I smiled. "No, just feels important." The honesty in his voice hit me hard, because he was right. It did feel important, more important than either of us wanted to admit yet. We weren't in love, not yet, but something was growing, something real, something steady, and neither of us wanted to rush it, which was exactly why the next thing Ashton said surprised me. A lot. He hesitated, then smiled nervously. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." His fingers tapped lightly against his knee, a telltale sign he was nervous. "Would you maybe want to meet my friends next weekend?" My heart skipped, not because meeting friends was a huge commitment, because it meant something. It meant he was imagining me in his future, not just next week, not just tomorrow, further ahead. And judging by the hopeful look on his face, he cared what my answer would be. I smiled. "Yeah." Relief immediately flooded his expression. "Yeah, of course." Ashton laughed, then leaned over and kissed me. Soft, warm, happy. When he pulled away, he looked lighter somehow, like a weight had disappeared. Neither of us knew it yet, but next weekend would change everything. Because meeting his friends would lead to a conversation neither of us was expecting. A conversation that would make us finally realize just how serious this relationship was becoming. The following weekend, I met Ashton's friends. And honestly, I was terrified. Not because I thought they wouldn't like me, because I cared whether they did. That was new. Normally, meeting friends was just another step in dating. This felt bigger. Maybe because Ashton had become such a significant part of my life. Or maybe because I could tell this mattered to him. Either way, I spent far too much time deciding what shirt to wear. When I arrived at the brewery where everyone was meeting, Ashton immediately noticed my expression. "You look nervous." "I'm not nervous." He raised an eyebrow. "Bradley, I'm extremely nervous." That made him laugh. The tension instantly eased. He squeezed my hand. "They're going to love you. You don't know that." "I do." The confidence in his voice made my chest feel warm. Inside, I met 6 of his closest friends. And to my relief, they were all incredibly welcoming. Within 30 minutes, it felt less like an interrogation and more like hanging out with people I'd known for years. Still, I noticed something interesting. Every time Ashton got up to grab drinks or use the restroom, someone would make a comment. Not embarrassing comments. Sweet ones. "He talks about you constantly." Or, "We've been hearing about Bradley for weeks." Or my personal favorite, "You have no idea how happy he is lately." Every single remark made my heart beat a little faster, because it confirmed something I'd secretly hoped. Ashton wasn't just dating me. He was excited about me, proud of me, happy to have me in his life. The feeling was very mutual. Later that evening, Ashton disappeared to order another round. I was talking to one of his friends, Ethan, when he glanced toward the bar, then smiled. "You know he's gone, right?" I looked confused. "What?" Ethan laughed. "Ashton. What about him?" His grin widened. "I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." My stomach immediately tightened. I followed his gaze. Across the room, Ashton was waiting for drinks. And sure enough, he was looking directly at me. The moment our eyes met, he smiled. Completely automatic. Like he couldn't help it. Ethan shook his head. "See?" I couldn't stop smiling. And for the first time, a thought entered my head that scared me a little. I wasn't just falling for Ashton anymore. I was already there. Completely. The realization followed me home that night. And for the next several days, I tried not to overthink it. Tried not to rush anything. But the truth remained. Every morning felt better when I saw him. Every bad day felt easier when he called. Every future plan somehow included him. And that realization only grew stronger. Then something happened that neither of us expected. A week later, I got sick. Really sick. Nothing serious. Just one of those awful flu bugs that completely knocks you out. Fever. Headache. Exhaustion. The works. I texted Ashton Monday morning. "Not coming in today. Flu finally got me." His response arrived almost immediately. "Stay in bed. Drink water. Rest." "Yes, Mom. I'm serious." I laughed, then spent the next few hours sleeping. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. "Open the door." I stared at the message, then at the name. "Ashton?" "Open the door, Bradley." Confused, I dragged myself across the apartment. When I opened the door, Ashton was standing there holding 2 grocery bags. My brain completely stopped working. "What are you doing here?" He looked equally confused. "Taking care of you?" Like it was obvious. Like there was no other possible answer. I just stared. Ashton eventually laughed. "You gonna let me in?" I stepped aside, still speechless. The next 3 hours changed something between us. Not because of anything dramatic. Because of all the little things. He made soup. Forced me to drink water. Refused to let me apologize for looking terrible. At one point, he covered me with a blanket and adjusted the pillow behind my head. A tiny gesture. A simple gesture. Yet it hit me harder than almost anything else. because nobody had taken care of me like that in a long time. Not since my last serious relationship. Maybe even longer. At some point Ashton sat beside me on the couch. I was half asleep, half delirious, but I remember looking at him, watching him scroll through his phone while staying there simply because he wanted to, because he cared. And before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The room immediately went silent. My eyes widened. His did too. For one horrifying second, I wished I could take the words back. Not because they weren't true, because I hadn't planned to say them. Especially not while sick and wrapped in a blanket like a burrito. Ashton stared at me. Then a smile slowly appeared. Soft, warm, beautiful, good. My heart stopped. "What?" He set his phone aside, then took my hand. Because apparently he enjoyed making me emotional. "Because I'm falling in love with you too." For a moment neither of us spoke. I don't think I even breathed. Everything felt strangely calm, certain, like we'd both been carrying the same secret. Waiting, hoping, terrified. And now it was finally out in the open. Neither of us said, "I love you," that day. Not yet. But somehow we both knew it was coming. The feeling was already there. Growing, becoming impossible to ignore. And a few weeks later, one unexpected moment at the cafe would finally bring those words into the open. For real, after the flu incident, everything felt different. Not awkward, not rushed, just deeper. The walls we'd both been keeping up had finally started coming down. We still hadn't said the actual words. Not officially, but we both knew what was happening. And honestly, I think that made every moment feel even more meaningful. A simple text from Ashton could completely change my day. A phone call before bed suddenly felt important. Even our usual morning coffee routine carried a different weight now. One Thursday morning, I walked into the cafe and immediately noticed something strange. Ashton looked nervous, again, which was becoming a pattern whenever he was about to do something meaningful. "Should I be worried?" I asked. He laughed. "Maybe. That answer never helps." He slid my coffee across the counter, then glanced toward one of his coworkers. She immediately disappeared into the back room with a suspicious smile. My eyes narrowed. "What are you two planning?" "Nothing." The fact that he looked guilty instantly told me it wasn't nothing. I picked up my coffee. That's when I noticed writing on the side of the cup. Not my name. Not the drink order. A message. "Check the bottom." I stared, then looked at Ashton. His face was turning red. "What did you do?" "Just look." I slowly lifted the cup. Taped underneath was a folded piece of paper. My heart immediately sped up. The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. I unfolded it. Inside was a simple handwritten note. "You made this place my favorite part of every day. Ashton." I looked up, completely speechless. Ashton looked equally nervous. "Too cheesy." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because I couldn't think of anything else to do. Then I shook my head. "No." His shoulders relaxed. "No. No." I folded the note carefully. "Definitely not." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then one of his coworkers shouted from the back. "That was adorable." The entire cafe burst into laughter, including Ashton, including me, and somehow that became one of my favorite memories. Not because of the note, because of the look on his face afterward. Happy, open, completely genuine. A few days later, we took a weekend trip. Nothing elaborate, just a small lakeside town about 2 hours away. A spontaneous getaway. No schedules, no responsibilities, just us. The first day was perfect. We walked through local shops, ate too much food, sat near the water talking for hours. And somewhere during that trip, I realized something. I wasn't imagining a future with Ashton anymore. I was expecting one. The thought should have scared me. Instead, it felt right. That evening we sat on a dock watching the sunset. The lake reflected streaks of orange and gold. Everything felt still, peaceful. Ashton sat beside me with his shoulder touching mine. Neither of us had spoken for several minutes. We didn't need to. Then he quietly said, "You know what's funny?" What? I used to hope you'd come into the cafe every morning. I smiled. Used to. His grin appeared. Okay, I still do. I laughed. Good. The smile lingered on his face, then gradually faded into something softer, more serious. He looked out across the water. I think meeting you changed my life. My chest tightened. Not because the statement was dramatic, because it was honest, and because I felt exactly the same way. I turned toward him. Mine too. His eyes met mine. The fading sunlight reflected in them. For a moment neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Then Ashton smiled. Small, nervous, like he was about to jump without knowing whether he'd land safely. And suddenly I knew. I knew exactly what he wanted to say, because I wanted to say it too. The words had been sitting inside me for weeks, growing heavier every day. Waiting. Ready. Ashton's voice was barely above a whisper. Bradley. My heart pounded. Fast. Hard. Everything inside me already knew what was coming. And for the first time, neither of us was afraid of it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The lake stretched endlessly before us, calm and quiet beneath the fading sunset. Everything felt suspended, like the world itself was holding its breath. Ashton was still looking at me. His expression was nervous, hopeful. The same expression I'd seen the day he'd asked me out. The same expression he'd worn when he brought soup to my apartment. The same expression he'd had every time he'd chosen to be vulnerable with me. And somehow, seeing it now made me love him even more. Bradley. My heart hammered against my ribs. I smiled softly. Yeah. He laughed nervously. A short breath. Then another. I had this whole speech planned. That immediately made me grin. You had a speech? A good one. I doubt that. Hey. I laughed. Sorry. Continue. Ashton shook his head, then looked out across the water again. I've rewritten it about 50 times. That sounds about right. Thanks for the support. We both laughed. The nervousness eased slightly. Then Ashton became serious again. His eyes found mine. And this time he didn't look away. When I first saw you walk into the cafe, I thought you were attractive. I smiled. I hoped so. Let me finish. I held up my hands. Sorry. His grin appeared briefly, then faded. I thought you were attractive. I thought you seemed nice. Then I learned your coffee order. I laughed. The famous coffee order. The very famous coffee order. He shook his head. But then I started looking forward to seeing you. His voice softened. Every morning. The laughter disappeared from both of us. I'd notice when you were late. A small smile. I'd notice when you looked tired. Another pause. I'd notice when you seemed happy. His eyes never left mine. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being about coffee. My chest tightened. The good kind. The overwhelming kind. The kind you never want to end. Ashton swallowed. Then continued. You became the best part of my day. The sunset reflected across the lake behind him. Yet somehow I couldn't focus on anything except his face. His voice. His eyes. Then one day I realized something. His smile returned. Small. Beautiful. I wasn't waiting for a customer anymore. My throat felt tight. Emotionally tight. I was waiting for you. That nearly broke me. In the best possible way. The silence that followed felt enormous. Because every word was true. Every single one. I moved closer. Our shoulders touched. Neither of us looked away. Then Ashton laughed softly. See? What? My speech was terrible. I shook my head immediately. No. Bradley. No. I smiled. It was perfect. His eyes softened. And suddenly I couldn't keep the words inside anymore. Not another second. Not after everything we'd shared. Not after everything we'd built. Not after months of falling deeper and deeper for this man. I reached for his hand, then finally said it. The words I'd been carrying for weeks. The words that had been waiting for exactly this moment. I love you. The second they left my mouth, everything felt lighter. Simpler, right? Ashton's eyes widened. Not from surprise. From emotion. Real emotion. the kind that reaches all the way down. For a moment he simply stared at me. Then he smiled. And I knew. Before he even spoke. I knew. I love you too, Bradley. The words hit harder than I expected. Harder than anything. Because they were real. Completely real. And because they came from him. The man who remembered my coffee order. The man who remembered my name. The man who remembered every tiny detail that mattered. The man who had quietly become my favorite person. Ashton squeezed my hand, then leaned forward. Our kiss was slow, warm, comfortable. Nothing rushed, nothing dramatic, just certainty. When we pulled apart, neither of us stopped smiling. We sat there until long after the sun disappeared, talking, laughing, making plans. The future no longer felt hypothetical, felt real. Months later, things only got better. Ashton eventually moved on from the cafe and started pursuing the career he'd always wanted. I was there every step of the way, just like he was there for me. We met each other's families, celebrated birthdays together, took road trips, built traditions, built a life. And every once in a while, I'd still stop by that little coffee shop, usually with Ashton beside me. The employees would laugh and tease us, especially the co-workers who'd watched everything happen from the beginning. One morning, nearly a year after our first date, we walked into the cafe together. The same co-worker who had yelled, "Just ask him already," looked up, then pointed at us. "I take full credit for this relationship." Ashton laughed. "You absolutely do not. You're welcome." We both rolled our eyes, then ordered coffee. As we waited, I looked around the shop. The same brick walls, the same tables, the same smell of espresso, the same place where everything had started. And suddenly I remembered that first morning. The new barista, the smile, the conversation, the moment he remembered my order. Back then, I thought it was just coffee, a simple routine, pleasant part of my morning. I had no idea it would become the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to me. Ashton noticed me smiling. "What?" I shook my head. "Nothing." He narrowed his eyes. "That's suspicious." I laughed, then leaned over and kissed his cheek. His smile appeared instantly, and just like always, seeing it made my day better. Maybe that's how I knew. Not just that I loved him, but that I'd keep loving him. For a very long time. Because sometimes the biggest changes in your life don't begin with grand gestures. Sometimes they begin with a coffee order. And a barista who remembers your name.